I wanted to address a full video to people's fears of opening up a trucking company. Whether you're a company driver, owner, operator, at some point or another, you've thought about opening up your trucking company. Now, you've probably stumbled upon this channel where you get a lot of information about how to become successful as a company driver and how to open up a small fleet. Now, there is a full series on how to open up a trucking company in the US that I've done myself. There's a lot of common questions that I get asked in my consultations, and I thought, why not dedicate a full video on these most popular questions that people ask, and it's about their fears of opening up a trucking company. So let's address these fears, okay? So number one, we're gonna break this video down into 4 parts. Question number one that I get asked all the time is, how much money do I need in order to start a trucking company? The second question I get all the time is, will I be able to dispatch myself? So a lot of owner operators wanna open up their own authorities and to be able to dispatch themselves, have 1 or 2 trucks, and that's enough for them. They don't need anything more. What happens if dispatching and finding loads for yourself is too hard and I can't do it? Did I lose everything that I've done until today? So I'm going to address that because I feel like that is a common question that a lot of people have. And the fourth thing is, can I survive with today's rates? So is it a good time to do it, and should I do it? So I'll leave that to the end. Let's talk about question number one on how much money should you have in order to do this. So if you are thinking of opening up a trucking company and you've seen the entire series of how we did it and the cost associated with it and the freight brokers that we used and the tax accountants that we used, and I lined everything up in this entire series on how we did it, and I even did a whole video on the challenges that we had so you don't stumble upon it. And now I want to talk about the cash flow. How much money do you actually need in order to do it? Well, if you're an owner operator and you have your own truck and you have your own trailer, really, I mean, the reserves that you should have is not anything different than the reserves that you have for being an owner operator for breakdowns. But the cash flow that you should have is anywhere, my rule of thumb is anywhere between $30,000 to $40,000, and you're good to go. Now, why do I say this? Is because any small fleet that's opening right now, or any trucking company, or any owner operator that's going to get his own authorities and start dispatching themselves, or find a company that does the dispatch service for them, is going to be using a factoring service, okay? Now, factoring services are great. It's a very, very good product. Now, I remember that when we opened up our MC number, and then when it went live, I received probably, 40, 50, 60 calls nonstop on factoring services. Now, factoring services is a great service. Why? Because whenever you do a pickup and then you do a delivery, once you do a delivery, you send your PODs and invoice to the factoring company. That factoring company is going to purchase that receivable from you, and then you can forget about it. The only 2 rules I have with factoring companies is, number one, make sure that your contract has the no recourse, okay? And I'll get into what that means. So no recourse means that if the brokerage company doesn't pay the factoring company, you have nothing to do with it. So yes, it costs maybe just a little bit more for that service. Today's rates for one truck is probably anywhere between, 3%, we'll call it, okay? Now that 3%, you should have no recourse. It doesn't matter which company you're using, and I'll link up a company that I recommend in a form below, that if you want factoring services or you want to inquire about factoring services, I'll recommend somebody. That form will go to somebody that I recommend, that I think is a really good company out there, and they have great products out there. So second most important thing is no reserves. Remember that, no recourse, no reserves. Why? Because no reserves usually means that, if you've done work that pays $2,000, then the factoring company will take 3% and will pay you out 97%. Okay, and they're not going to withhold anything else. What do I mean by that? So let's take a $2,000 invoice, okay, and then you multiply that by 0.97, which is what you're going to get. You're going to get a check for $1,940 and no recourse, meaning they cannot come after you if they don't get paid. And the second thing is no reserves, meaning they paid you out fully for the 97%. And the company that I've recommended below, they have these programs out there for you. So the fear on how much money or how much cash flow do I need, a lot of owner operators think they need $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Well, you actually don't, as long as you have your $30,000, $40,000 reserves plus you're using a factoring company, you will be just fine. The second thing I want to talk about is, will I be able to dispatch myself? Okay, I do tons and tons of skits on me doing load booking, and you see the kind of questions that I ask the brokers, and you see how I map it out, and you see the negotiations, and you see how much money I need. At the end of the day, will you be able to do it? Absolutely, you'll be able to do it. Like anything else, it's going to be hard at the beginning, okay, and then you will be just fine. You're going to book for yourself. You're going to get offloaded in North Carolina, you'll have a load. You'll post a truck and you'll have a load for yourself when you are in North Carolina. The same thing happens in Pennsylvania. You offload, you'll be able to find yourself loads, or you'll be able to post your trucks where brokers are going to call you for your service. Reasonable fears that people have is, what happens if I can't book loads for myself? Ronen, you know, I've given it a try. I've tried it. It's very hard for me to book loads. They constantly want paperwork back and forth. They constantly want contracts. They constantly want, there is paperwork that goes back and forth. And I tell them, listen, so what's the big deal? There are so many dispatch services out there. I mean, by the dozens, there's so many dispatching services out there. So big deal. You will work with one or two dispatch companies that are gonna offer you loads. Let them offer you multiple loads, okay? And I've done skits on this, that they should offer you multiple loads, and you should be able to decide as an owner operator. And if you're paying, I mean, today the fees are probably anywhere between 4 to 6% for a dispatch service, okay? And they will do all the paperwork for you. They'll do all the contracts with, you know, all the contracts with the broker. They'll even do the, you know, the invoices, the PODs, and send it over to the customer. I mean, they pretty much take care of almost everything, right? So you're big deal, so you won't be able to. And if you find that it's very hard for you, so you'll have a company that you're gonna pay 4 to 6% to, and they will do the dispatching for you. It's not the end of the world. And the last thing we're gonna talk about, which everybody asks me in my consultations, is, can I survive with today's rates? And my answer to you is yes. Absolutely, you can survive, even though the national average is $2.10 per mile. It all depends on what is your appetite, okay? So it depends on your truck, it depends on your trailer, it depends on your payments. It's a very hard question to ask without analyzing the information. So if your monthly expenses exceed the $2.05, then you are setting yourself up for failure. What I do in my consultations is I will take the entire picture of their expenses, we'll route it into a rate per mile, and then we'll see, what do we need to run these trucks at in order to be profitable. Those are the exercises that I do in my consultations. So if you are asking, you know, is right now a good time? I can say, you know what, it is, but it depends on your situation. And for those that the situation is not good, when is it going to be a good time? So I ask you always to look at your rate per mile on what it costs you to run a mile, or if you are going to open up a trucking company, what is it going to cost you to run a mile? So an owner operator that has a bought out truck that has, you know, or minimum payments, like minimal payments, he pays $1,000 for his truck and his trailer is bought out, his rate per mile, his break-even point for his rate per mile is going to be different than the owner operator that bought a brand new truck with a brand new trailer and is paying, you know, $5,000-6,000 a month, you know, on this new equipment. His rate per mile is going to be completely different. The insurance company that you use, you know, if one owner operator has insurance that he's paying $32,000 a year for, and you have another owner operator who's paying $18,000, that's a huge difference in when you dissect it into a rate per mile. Now, for those of you who are coming out at a loss, or for those of you that the rate per mile is higher than the national average, then there are trigger points. Okay, so you need to tell yourself that, okay, as long as the national average is under a certain point, then it's not worth it for me to get into the market. But once that national average reaches, you know, 2.15, 2.2, 2.25, with all of our scenarios, it's different for everybody. But there is a trigger point of when you should walk into the industry if you're thinking about it, and you can increase your chances of success a lot by knowing these trigger points, okay? Or what is that trigger point? Now, when is a good time to pull the trigger? Only you can decide for yourself on what your appetite is for profitability. So the $1 million question is, when is the right time to get into the market? Well, I guess it all depends on your appetite for profitability, right? What you can do is you can set everything up, have everything lined up for yourself, and then once the rate per mile, the trigger point happens, then you can enter the market. That would be the smartest thing that you can do. Hopefully you learned something from this video. Don't be shy to leave a comment or concerns below. I'm Ronen, R-O-N-E-N, and I'll catch you in my next video.